This is part of the Big Heads Media Podcast Network. Go to bigheadsmedia.com for more great podcasts.
Welcome to Dig on America, where we speak truth to power. Every week, we give you the dig on how American history, policies, and media created the social and political issues we face today. DOA is independent media supported by listeners.
So if you look, so I, you know, from my political standpoint, I come from the standpoint of, you know, I was supporting Bernie Sanders in 2016, and more slightly less so, but still in 2020. But if you look at this piece of art behind me, you've got a donkey and an elephant, and I don't know if you can see it. They're playing with a beach ball, right? And then down here are the people, right? So they get to play with the beach ball. They throw it back and forth. That's power.
Keep away.
And the people, they're like, when do I get to touch it? When do I get to touch it? Yeah, you don't ever get to touch it. You don't ever get to touch the beach ball, right? So this is a little bit how I see it. I if we're on this show, when I'm on a show with like a more right-leaning host, I might push back on some of that. On this show, I may push back on some of the assumptions we make about the left. I mean, I think that the DNC, they attack progressives and independent left more than they do Republicans.
Yes.
They're more at risk of losing their power from like a Bernie Sanders or some other kind of revolution within the left than they are from the Republicans, because they've got this two-step dance that works for them right now. They'd rather lose the Republicans than lose to, have Bernie Sanders win. And I saw that very clearly in 2016. So yeah, we have to be honest about what we're up against when you talk about basically establishing what I say true progressivism is the interest of more broadly spreading wealth and power among people. And I would say today you have some forces of that on both the right and the left. And I'd say maybe it's what people call populist. So you have some progressive energy on both the left and the right, and you have a lot of fake progressivism as well, right? And so to really be honest about that and look at who is actually pushing power downward and outward, and who is trying to concentrate power upward and more narrowly, right? That's the reactionary force. And conservatism is just trying to keep the pyramid how it is. Right. So if we really take a look at that, I think it's really fascinating to see how few people we have on either side in the big parties, that are actually progressive in a genuine sense. And that's one of the reasons I wrote the book, is because I think it's independent media is bringing about an awakening to this. It's bringing about an awareness across the political parties, across the spectrum, that this is a top-down thing more than a left-right thing. And the independent media, like you guys doing this show, like me writing my book, like other shows I've been on, taking back the narrative and reframing it, I think is really that's where I see the potential for change.
Okay, here's where I got to ask a question. Who do you see on the right who is progressive? I have to know.
Well, so we have to be, I want to define the word progressive again. So we're talking about the same thing. So how I use it is in more like looking back over the last 1,000 years, okay? Over the last 1,000 years, right, since Magna Carta, right, I'm taking a big arc. Progressivism is basically moving power and wealth down and out. So like basically the end of feudalism, if we just stay in like a European perspective for a minute, like the end of feudalism, giving way to the first Enlightenment, which I talk about a lot in my book, basically the printing press and how that toppled the power of feudalism and also the Catholic Church. And then you had revolutions and constitutions like ours, and like the French Revolution, that basically got rid of monarchy and established constitutional democracy. Very progressive, a very, very progressive act. And our constitution was not perfect. There are a lot of problems with it. Obviously, we get into that. But it was an extremely progressive thing to do, to basically say, we're going to have a piece of paper, and we have these creeds like all men are created equal, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of religion. Revolutionary, crazy, wild, progressive ideas a lot of people thought would never work. I don't know, has it worked or not? We're still kind of trying to figure that out. So taking that long arc, so now we come to like the last 100 years or something, right? And like looking at which party, if you want to look at which party has more stood for continuing to broaden wealth and power, right? And which ones are concentrating power more narrowly into fewer and fewer hands, right? Corporate hands, the heads of the parties. So in that regard, I would say...
Please don't say Marjorie Taylor Greene.
No,
please. I have a bad feeling you're going to say Marjorie Taylor Greene's a progressive.
I'm not going to say Marjorie Taylor Greene. I don't know enough about her. I've followed her. I follow everybody I can. I don't have time to follow every single person. But
I'm so worried about. That's so
And like, and that's
What else are
been
you
Dig
worried
on
about? Maybe I
America
should try to
forever.
maybe I should say some things that are gonna get you worried.
Goodbye.
no, it's no, but like I look, your opinion is your opinion, right? Like you're entitled to your opinion, but bad ideas on this show don't go very well for people who give bad opinions. But the
Stop threatening the man.
I'm
I'm not going to yell at him.
He didn't
I like
say
him.
it, but there's a group of people who equate AOC to like Lauren Boebert, and they think like they're exactly the same. And it's like I don't see any of that.
Let me instead go with where you were. It sounds like you voted for Gary Johnson, so you passed through. You either still are libertarian. I would say libertarianism is a mixed bag, but there's some extremely progressive ideas in libertarianism.
Yeah, like libertarianism started on the left.
Absolutely, because the idea of liberty, the idea that you get to live your life how you want, is progressive, right? If you were a feudal serf, or you were a slave, or you were like working a wage slave like today, you can't live your life exactly how you want to, right? So the notion of libertarianism is progressive, although there's some problems with it. So we could talk about who's the famous libertarian in Congress that
Rand Paul.
Yeah,
Rand
but he's
Paul.
not a he's also not a real libertarian.
right,
no
so,
true Scotsman fallacy. How original, Dutch.
His dad may have been more true libertarian.
It's the same.
So I would say that strand.
Same person.
I would say that strand on the right is progressive. That is, if we really get into it and we want to get in there, yes, that strand on the right is a progressive strand in the sense that if you're an authoritarian, right? If you want to be a reactionary, you want to concentrate more and more power into fewer and fewer hands. You don't want liberty. You don't want people to have the liberty to choose what they get to say, what they get to eat, what they get to think, where they get to go. You don't want that. You want to control that. So I'm saying that's an example of progressivism on the right. On the left, we definitely, something like giving people healthcare. That's a progressive thing. If you can, there's ways that it can be more progressive versus less progressive. But yeah, if you're basically or doing something like like debt cancellation, right? That's progressive because you're returning wealth and power to more people. So that's one of the things I do in the Balanced Media Diet in the book is I create a pyramid and I distinguish what I call the right news or red news and blue news from a different section of the pyramid, which is I call like genuine progressive, genuine conservative, genuine libertarian thought. Like it's important to have some like Republican news, Democrat news, just so you know what's going on, MSNBC or Fox or NPR or whatever it is, but also to have genuine thought, versions of events, analysis, reporting on news that's coming from an authentic position. And often those people will be critical of both political parties. Not always, but usually a genuine conservative thinker or a genuine progressive thinker, a genuine libertarian will be critical of both parties. That's often one of the signals that that this is an authentic political perspective because they care about their beliefs more than the party. I'm not saying those people are always right either. Sometimes you have to care about party when you want to try to get something done. But anyway, I think I tried to answer your question.
We got a couple comments from the chat. X from the Utah Outcast. What up, X? There's a reason that corporations fund candidates on both sides of the aisle. And then there was one more. When people tell you who they are, believe them.
Yeah, that's for sure.
I have known that since a small pup. I remember my mom saying that.
So like I look at things. I think I just look at things the way that I look at things, right? So I don't know if it's mainstream or if it's I'm an outlier or whatever. But like I said this yesterday to somebody, I don't wake up in the morning and think, "Hi, I'm Jason. I'm a radical leftist." I wake up in the morning and think I'm Jason, the same person that I was 10, 15 years ago, but I think different things now than I thought then. And when you grow up a Republican, you are taught a certain set of values. And when you look at what is being pushed by the Republican Party today, none of it falls in line with those values, especially those Christian values that I grew up with, at least the core of those values, right? Take away all of the mysticism and stuff like that and the supernatural. We won't get into that. I'm just talking about the love thy neighbor, forgive others who, as you want them to forgive you, that sort of thing. those real core tenets of Christianity, and all of that is really gone. So like from a moral standpoint, I reject the notion that religion is necessary for morality. So that takes religion out of the conversation for me. But when I was at the point in my journey where I was identifying as an independent or like a centrist, the problem was that, like, what is a centrist, right? So like, if you were going to define someone as a centrist, you'd say, well, this person has some right-wing leanings and has some left-wing leanings. But I didn't ever really see it that way, because like I was always, even when I was a Republican, I was actually always for universal health care. Always. I've been for universal health care in some capacity for like 10 years. And I used to think it was best maybe if we did it for people over 60 and people under 20, and that everybody else in the middle worked, but that's still being for some form of better healthcare than what we have now.
Mhm.
So now I've changed that view a little bit, but the point of the matter was, like, you can, just because I felt I was in the center, that didn't mean that I had to have a lukewarm opinion on healthcare, right? Like, oh, I'm fine. I see the good of what we have now, or it could be better. No, what we have now fucking is bad. Me being lukewarm about it means nothing, right? Like when it came to Black Lives Matter and like Ferguson and stuff like that, even as a Republican, there were still a couple of things that I would buy into, like, the black on black crime myth and stuff like that, where I was like, okay, well, that makes sense, I guess. Yeah, that's something that we have to take care of. But it doesn't change the fact that I know history about Jim Crow and stuff like that too. So like, yes, I'm not going to take a lukewarm stance on Black Lives Matter. I'm not going to take a lukewarm stance on Colin Kaepernick. I knew right away that Colin Kaepernick was getting fucked. You want to talk about cancel culture? That's cancel culture, right?
No, he quit his job by being unpatriotic.
Yes, he quit his job. You know what I mean? So it's like,
you gotta put that English
on
it when you.
But I guess my point is, like, just to put a bow tie on, is like, you can say you're in the center, but that doesn't mean you have to be in the middle on every issue. You can be a vehement 2A supporter and a vehement supporter of climate change at the exact same time. Like you have a lot of people who feel that way too, because you might be a hunter who, loves hunting and therefore wants to protect his gun rights, but also because he loves hunting, loves the environment and is very pro-environmental, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I completely agree with what you're saying. I think yeah, and I actually think we're going through a political realignment. I think the pandemic and like all of the stuff, and I know you want to kind of give a wide berth around some of those debates, but the fact that they were so contentious and that people came down in surprising places, I think within Congress and the parties, I think we're going through a realignment. And I think that's partly because the parties don't really map that well onto how people actually view things. But the media, and I see the parties to some extent as downstream of the media. So like because the media basically pushes us into this, and it's become more and more polarized, where like if you listen to NPR or you read the New York Times, and then you go and you read the Epoch Times, or you go or Fox News, it's almost like you're in two complete different worlds, right? And that is what's creating this sort of real intense polarity between the parties. But in actual truth, when they poll people, they find people have very diverse views, and I'm one of them, and you are as well, I'm sure. Like, my views don't map totally onto the parties. In fact, I disagree with both parties on quite a bit. But I guess what I'm saying is I agree with you, and I think that that's another reason that we're in what I call, and I use this term in the book quite a bit, a new enlightenment. And I compare this time to that time when the printing press was invented. Internet is still in its infancy, and the ability for us to have this conversation, or for you to go and post something on Twitter or on Facebook or on Twitch and instantly create your own narrative and your own news, and it can be digested by millions of people all around the world, that is totally shifting the power structures on the planet, and definitely in our culture as well. We're in the very infancy of it, and it's going to continue to bring about independent media. And also, I don't know if it's going to be an independent party, like whether we can actually have an independent party in this country with the way that the system is set up, or if it's just going to continue to cause these sort of realignments and, you know, Trump and Bernie kind of overturning the establishment of the party, or trying to, and I would say succeeding maybe on one side and failing on the other. Yeah, I think that's what's going on. And I think it's either scary or confusing or exciting, depending on how you look at it. Yeah.
And we were talking before we went live about how I cannot wait to get me and my wife the hell out of America. This kind of breeds into it. This is the conversation I wanted to be the backdrop for me to slip this in here. Whilst the parties are battling amongst themselves, just try to remember the people's reaction through all of this stuff. It was the most sloshing bathtub you could have ever imagined, where people were flipping, and like the radicalization of so many people so quickly tells me all I need to know. When people can go from being your best mate, high school friends, to fuck you, get a job. Wow, what a place.
Yeah.
And that's place. And social media used to be hilarious and filled with porn. It is now filled with ads and radicals. That's all you get. It's always rads and radicals. You can't find anything in between unless you scroll for 45 seconds. But we do that just so that, you know, you get the right kind of, you know, balance in your feed. It's crazy. And the way the companies are kind of positioning themselves to kind of amp it up and merge with other companies so that they can kind of get all the data and get all the best ads and all the best. It's like, ooh, this is only going to get worse, because we all remember when the cell phone came out, especially when you got internet on your phone. First of all, it's the worst fucking thing that you'd ever try to use to search anything. You could never like solve an argument on Google on your fucking cell phone when they first came out. They were too slow. You just go,
your Motorola Razr.
You
just typing 336.
It's faster to drive the 45 minutes home and get on AOL at that point. But the way that people have completely given themselves up to social media and the political influence that social media can have on people, it's grim. It's grim for me trying to start a family. Like, it's grim.
So you're planning to move to another country to start your family? Is that what's going on, Mikey?
I like to go somewhere tamer, or someone like in less than DEFCON 4 or 5. Like I'll take a DEFCON 1. At this point, I'll take a DEFCON 1. But here is so hot, spicy, irritated. It's like a boil on like underneath the armpit of some giant. We're in a bad spot, and everyone's like, "It'll get better. Joe Biden's here," and I'm like, "No, the idiots lost, and now they're mad. What are you talking about? Like, they don't believe in peaceful transfers of power. Like, this is the rat is jumping off the ship as soon as he can get to the deck. He's out of here. Something bad's not coming. Something not good.
I'm curious where you're gonna go. Where's the DEFCON 2 or 3 or 4 place?
That's the rub.
As bad as Brexit is, damn, they don't have guns over there though, do they?
No, and you need.
Will the cops have tasers? Oh, I'll be fine.
Yeah, you're better armed than the cops.
I could survive a taser.
But like, I think, I haven't listened to any of the interviews that you did on any other shows, Tony, but I did look and see that you were on a couple of other shows, and like, I kind of looked up the shows and I was like, all right, this is a right-wing show. This is a right-wing show. And like, we've talked to you now for an hour. I think you're a good guy. What my concern is that because you are talking about things like cancel culture, that dishonest people are going to platform you to promote other ideas that you may not even be sponsoring, and again, I don't presume to know what you believe about things like the election and stuff like that. But like those, it doesn't matter, because most of the B tier of right wing media, like even the A tier, like your OANs, your Newsmaxes, your Fox News, they of course. Well, I mean, that's like on cable, so you have to call it. I'm talking about like I'm talking
high
about
dollar amount.
And this is a different B tier than what Irish Swede was talking about last week.
It's about eyeballs, right? Like how many eyeballs they get.
Yeah, and they have an agenda to get bigger, and they know they're going to get bigger by pushing the narratives that their viewers want to hear. Their viewers want to hear that COVID was a conspiracy against Trump. They want to hear that the election was rigged and that Trump won. They want to hear that teachers are turning boys into girls and boys and girls into boys. They want to hear that Black Lives Matter is a terrorist organization. They want to hear that teachers are peddling CRT, though oddly enough, they want to arm those same teachers, which is really strange.
The grad school first graders,
Yeah, it's really strange that Marjorie Taylor Greene said, total sidebar here, arm teachers, and then said, teachers are monsters, protect your kids, like within a day. But anyway,
let me ask you this, Jason, because it sounds like you're concerned either about me or you're concerned about media.
I think you're a big boy and you can take care of yourself.
Well, that's certainly true.
Yeah.
But I guess my question is, do you believe that NPR and New York Times and the Washington Post don't have an agenda? Do you think they're reporting the news straight?
No, I believe they have an agenda, and it's an inch to the left of Newsmax. An inch. I don't find them to be as far left as and I say that, and I'm somewhat exaggerating, but not by much. Like, you cannot convince me that the New York Times cares about actual causes. Like they almost never, unless it's for wordplay or just to get credit for saying it, they'll say, oh, well, this country doesn't have healthcare, but they don't really want a healthcare program. They don't want to take money out of politics. They don't want to raise the minimum wage. When you actively put effort into doing those things, then I will say, okay, you're on my team. But in the meantime, you support the Nancy Pelosi's and the Chuck Schumers and the Mitch McConnells of the world, and they advertise Pelosi and McConnell as being light years apart. That might be true on some social issues, but it's not true fiscally. And the evidence shows that to be remarkably true.
So let me just, so I didn't write Red, White, and Blind from a partisan perspective. I don't think that there's the left or the right, even using those words. I think the Democrats and the Republicans, I don't think, and their red news and blue news, have a monopoly on the truth. I think they're both distorting the news, and not necessarily for causes. They're distorting the news for, I distinguish different kinds of bias. There's systemic bias based on like the corporation that owns them and their interests. There's nefarious bias, which is basically trying to change the news directly through nefarious means to support a particular agenda. And there's innocent bias, which is the bias that we have because of our background and like who we happen to be as people. And those are all three of them are having a profound effect on the news. And the reason I wrote the book is because I believe more deeply than I believe in my particular political beliefs, which we all have them. More deeply than that, I believe that the system that we have will only survive if we're able to confront the distortion, this disinformation, the censorship that's manipulating the news and really deceiving Americans. I mean, the book is called Red, White, and Blind because I believe we're all in a state of deception. We're all in a state where we're deceived to some extent by if we are in an echo chamber of one particular side of the news. So if you agree with that, then I think the conversation really is, so what do we do about that? And I think one of the great evils is censorship, in addition to disinformation and other kinds of manipulation, because if we have in the place of censorship, you can't actually have democracy. You can't even have science if there's censorship. And those are such fundamental background values of what we're trying to do here in the United States to like run the society. That's what I see as like the blinking red light. I also, have my political beliefs, and we can certainly get into them, and we might agree on things and disagree on things, and that's totally fine.
Sure.
But we
can solve all the world's problems over a beer.
Yeah. and I'll
Yeah.
probably open one here in a minute, and maybe
I
it'll
must
all
say, let
work.
me get some more ice from a bourbon. I didn't know we were doing that kind of stream. Let me get properly prepared.
Yeah, we'll have that with the Donas y Chesnacas.
Yes.
Oh, dude, I was just forgetting about that. Now I want it.
I know, man.
Some dark,
So yeah, I mean
dense,
the
garlicky bread.
Just curious, total sidebar. Where are you? What
I
state
live
do you
in
live in?
Sebastopol,
What's-
California.
Yeah,
What
what's
is
your
your street address?
Yeah, what is your street address?
This is called-
Oh,
this
so
is
you're in
called-
California. Okay, so
This
you're
is
on the
the
West
doxing
Coast.
phase of our show.
Yeah. So you're on the
And
West
this
Coast.
is the part where we dox everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm in Sebastopol, California. It's one
Where
of
the fuck is that?
It's one of the early hippie zones. It was like the nuclear free zone before there were nuclear free zones. It was one of the first like places where the hippies were like putting wedges in the redwoods to prevent the chainsaws from cutting them down.
Oh,
You're up north?
I'm in Bakersfield.
Okay, so Sebastopol is about about an hour north of San Francisco.
Oh, okay. So it's by like Redlands and stuff like that. Okay.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
Type of ball.
Petaluma,
Okay.
Sebastopol, Santa Rosa.
Yeah.
That's right.
126 Main Street in Sebastopol. Come go visit Tony.
What can I say? I'm a Chicago guy. I don't
I'm a
know. I don't
Chicago.
know none of that.
They
I have a lot of family in St. Louis, so I know the middle of the country. A little bit.
Hey, Alpha.
That's where I'm
I
from.
think the thing with me is like I'm tired of platitudes, right? And like I think the New York Times lives on platitudes. I think MSNBC lives on platitudes. Like I realize that the MSNBC is a left leaning news organization, but they're left leaning towards like the Pelosi faction, not towards and the Pelosi faction hasn't gotten anything done and isn't going to.
No,
So-
there's nothing progressive about Nancy Pelosi. There's
Right.
not.
No.
I lived in San Francisco for a long time. I was part of many efforts to try to run
You know
against her.
Shahid?
And yeah, Shahid Buttar, Matt Gonzalez, a
Yeah.
bunch of
He's
the
been on the show.
Shahid has been
Matt-
here. He's a good
He's
friend
our
of ours.
buddy.
Yeah.
those political machines, that are in the cities, whether they're Republican or Democrat, it doesn't have anything to do with policy. It has everything to do with power. And that's when I talk about reactionary, conservative, and progressive. That's the reactionary, even more than just conservative. It's conservative reactionary, right? They just want to hold on to power, and the policies come way down the line. Oh, what do I have to talk about? Okay, Medicare. Sure, I'll talk about Medicare.
Yeah, let me throw in a Kenty cloth and pretend that I all of a sudden give a shit about civil rights. But when I was talking about with you before, brother, was that like the issue with conservatives, and I know this not only from Twitter, not only from being a streamer, not only from being a human who goes to work, but from being in a overtly conservative family who for the most part, I love I love all of them, but for the most part, like they're genuinely decent people in most facets of their life. And like, but what happens with like cancel culture is one of these things where it's like the right is trying to create a narrative that, from my perspective, and my perspective is based on my experiences, yours might be different, but that it's something that's happening to them by this dark entity that is in control, and they're truth seekers, and they're being shut up because they're truth seekers. And because of that, it is one of the elements that is feeding the upcoming revolution, be it a biblical one or one through like what we saw on January 6th. And that is it to me, it is a grifting campaign of trying to build up the troops to feel like they have an enemy and they are being attacked by this sinister force that is unnamed yet led by Hillary. And I don't like Hillary, but I also know she's not leading that force. She ain't bright enough.
Well, what you said, Jason, actually sounds very similar to what you're actually accusing them of. So you're saying that there's this unnamed force that is supposedly trying to overtake everything that is sacred to you. So what I've realized is that both sides see it this way. Both sides have been convinced that the other side is so different from them and is hell-bent and believes that there's some dark force animating the other side that is not animating this they're on, and that because of that, you can justify. So on the right, they think that they can justify things that I would disagree with. And since you're on the left, I'll push back. The left believes that they can justify censorship based on this. This is what I've seen. And I think that that's very worrisome for me, because free speech is fundamental part of our democracy. And so I guess all I'm saying is one of the things I try to do with the book, and why I'm doing podcasts and stuff like that, is to see if I can have conversations across the spectrum where we can talk about these things, sort of taking a step back and looking at what's animating both sides. And I think if you look at that, you'll start to see like, okay, there's some similarities. Like both sides immediately tried to delegitimize the other. So when Trump won, there was this huge effort by the left to delegitimize his victory. And the same thing happened on the right. As soon as Biden won, there was a huge effort to delegitimize his victory. It also happened with Obama, right? It's almost like just cycled over and over again. Obama couldn't be president. It's all illegitimate because he wasn't born in this country. And then it was like, Trump was like, the Russians helped him and they put him in. It can't be legitimate. And then Biden, it can't be legitimate because, the voting machines were all off and stuff. And maybe there's some truth to those, but like by and large, like if you take a step back and you look at like, you have to acknowledge that there's some similarity here. There's some way that this stuff is being manipulated and cycled through, and there's somebody else sort of standing back and looking at that. And so part of the reason I wrote the book was to say, let's look at what that is. And what I realized the more and more as I wrote the book is it's about the media, and it's about understanding where this manipulation, deception is coming from in the media.
As soon as you realize that they're both on the same team and it's not your team, just go ahead and pack that bag, Dutch. Just go ahead and pick out a nice island somewhere. You can learn the local language. I'd say let them have it, because like this, because you're right on point, and that's the scary part.
No,
like,
you are.
So the solution for that is.
So the solution for that is that we're the team. We don't have to be with one of those two teams, right? We don't have to be with the donkey or the elephant up here. We're these people.
Right.
We're actually a way, way bigger team. We're a way, way, way bigger team. So, and it's already happening. I mean, this is like the good news or the scary news. Like, I think for Mikey, it's scary because we don't know where it's going to go. And it might go bad. It might go south. Like, I can't stand here and tell you it's all going to work out flowers and rainbows. It might not. But it might, right? I mean, what we're seeing is we're definitely seeing an awakening through this movement of independent media. And what I call the new enlightenment is we're going through this phase of starting to understand things for ourselves. And we're taking over this sort of top-down distribution of information, whether you get it from NPR or you get it from Fox. And there's lots of reasons to look at these different, and I spend several chapters in the book looking at each source. They're not all the same. But when we understand that we don't need a top-down distribution of information anymore, any more than they did when, they got rid of they didn't get rid of the Catholic Church, but people started to be able to write books and read for themselves. They didn't have to depend on the Catholic Church to tell them the earth is, the earth is in the center of the galaxy and it'll always be that way. And anybody that says different is gonna be burned at the stake and put on the rack, and then eventually people are like,
what are you doing with that telescope?
Yeah. What are you trying to figure out over there?
You're not observing anything, are you?
Yeah.
Do you see the comment on the screen though? Like this is kind of how I feel too. Like you look at what you just, I agree with what you just with what you said. You are going to see these delegitimization campaigns from both sides after an election. That's natural. It happens on the school board level too, right? So it happens all up and down the political spectrum. That's part of humans being bad. Like people suck, granted.
Yes.
But like you look at Obama, the birther thing was completely made up. When you look at the election thing with Biden, it was completely made up. The Mueller report was not made up. Like you could argue the fact that maybe Trump knew or didn't know or did or didn't collude, because collusion is absurdly hard to prove, as which I think anyone in the legal community will tell you that it's very hard to prove collusion because you have to be very precise with it, of whether or not the person knew that they were doing it. But you have 6-7 people within Trump's inner circle who were or still are in prison. And you don't have that with the Obama and Biden campaigns. Now, you can argue whether or not Trump knew about it, whether Eric or Donald Jr. or whatever knew about it. But when I talk about this with someone on the right, they jump immediately to, well, you listen to CNN too much. I haven't watched CNN in 7 years, other than maybe on election night, because they have, I like decision room. I think that's a good technology. I think that's the one at CNN. But it might be MSNBC. But the point of the matter is like things that are true, and things that are made up, like, you know, culture war shit, like drag queens are reading to our kids, and therefore our kids are all going to be gay. That's a culture war thing.
Time out.
That has
First of
nothing
all,
to do with it.
that has been a thing for years. The
Which
right just found out about it. The drag queens, they've been doing it in Frisco for years. It's been a thing forever, where it's just a nice thing to do, because no one was volunteering for this reading thing, and a bunch of drag queens said, "We'll do it." So they stepped up and filled the slot, and now it's been. And then they tried to corrupt the children. It's like, shut up, dude. You're already late to the party.
You know, and that's just like an example, but of a culture war. But like, you can't really, I don't see how you can compare birtherism to, we know for a fact that there was a Russian disinformation campaign. There is no doubt that there was a Russian disinformation campaign that took place on Facebook or whatever. The argument is whether or not Trump knew about it. That's the part that is up.
That's not the point. If you want to put me on the side of defending that, I certainly can. I write a little bit in my book about the Russiagate stuff. And I can talk about that. And I'm not surprised, right, that you, coming from the perspective you are, would say the one about Trump is kind of right, the other ones are totally wrong, and on the other side they think the reverse, right? Like if I was,
but I was a Republican at the time, though, so it's not really like I was on the left then, right? You have to remember that.
Okay, that's possible. So I guess the point I'm trying to make, and we can get into the Russiagate and the stuff about the election and stuff as well. I've done some research into both of those, and I write about Russiagate a little bit in my book, and we can talk about that. But the point that I'm making is both sides believe that they have the truth, right? That's going to always be the case, and they're going to be told that by their media. So if you tend to vote with Democrats and you mostly watch CNN or listen to NPR, you're going to be told you're right. And there's a biological impulse there, you know, confirmation bias, that we like that. It feels good. Like it's a complex world, and it's much more, we're probably even evolved. Like there's probably like some like strategic advantage or biological advantage to mostly hearing that you're right, rather than having the stress of cognitive dissonance. We don't like that. It's not good. But we also have an evolutionary impulse to learn the real truth. And to some of us, that's a stronger drive, and to some of us, it's a less strong drive. But to actually like confront unfamiliar ideas and really wrestle with them, and to talk to the other side. And I would say that that's not necessarily what's being encouraged right now. So one of the things that I encourage in the book is to try that on, to try on a little bit, contemplating the other side, listening to the other side. I mean, what if I told you that there was a path through which you could talk to your whole family again, and you could enjoy sitting with them, right? And it might at first feel a little bit challenging or difficult that you're going to sit there and read, what was the source you just mentioned, like OAN, right? You're going to read that for half an hour every day or something like that. Or there's going to be a media diet, so that you're going to start to understand that viewpoint. And you can still have your beliefs, right? At the end of the day, you can still be like, I think they're wrong. And I totally think this is right. But now you understand the viewpoint. And so you're much less likely to get into the side of like, I'm totally right, they're totally wrong, and I'm worried that they're going to come for my kids, right? That's really where it's gotten to. It's like, not only am I right and they're wrong, but they want to come, like you were just saying, you know, the right feels like the drag queens are coming for their kids, right? And from one perspective, if they just stay in their one perspective, that's true. That's really happening because they just read about it and they see it. But I've found a lot of open-minded conservatives in this work that are willing to look at it and be like, yeah, you know, you're right. That's probably not really what's going on, you know? But like, so what I'm saying is like, there's the possibility of all of us to do this, to start to go across the bridge a little bit. It's so much easier than it's ever been. Like, we are in an era where for the first time, maybe in human history, for the first time, you can like almost instantaneously get the viewpoints of like the entire world, right? Certainly you can get the viewpoints of 4 or 5 other ideologies in the United States within the US system. And I'm saying, if we do that, it's takes some work. You know, I'm asking people to spend 30 minutes a day or 60 minutes if you have either of those. And there's sort of 2 different diets and things like that. Because yes, it's important to know that there is truth, that certain things are true and certain things are false. And that the drive to understand what is true and what is false should not be shut down. In fact, you should channel that. that desire to know the truth is what will help you find the time to do the balanced media diet, because you really can learn and figure out not just what your side tells you about Russiagate or the election of 2020 or Obama's birthplace, but to actually know for yourself. But the road goes through, confronting some ideas that might at first feel completely anathema.
So I'm gonna read X's quote here. But that's putting all the legwork on the left to meet them halfway. And I wanted to say that because as an analogy, I hear that same thing when it comes to dealing with racist people. Right. And it's like, well, I know I have a Confederate flag, but have you just like walked over and shook their hand? It's like, no, motherfucker, why would I walk up to him? He stand his ground, castle doctrine my ass into straight up to Jesus. Like, what are you talking about? Like, that's like there's certain situations where it's so risky to do that, right? So even in like and I'm half joking, but like people at their family, like for Thanksgiving and stuff like that. And I'm an atheist, unavowed. Saying that you don't believe anymore, or saying that you're a Democrat, or saying something like these are wedge issues for certain families, or that could be it, and you're out of here, or you're gonna say all this shit is true, or you're gonna say all the shit that you've been watching. Like people are so polarized at this point that conversation is risky. So that's what, like, I don't mind having these conversations with people. But I would never invite somebody on the show and then they expect me to learn all of their shit and they're just going to stay in CNN. And I think I'm not alone. Again, Britain, Canada, Northern Mexico. Like these are like, I got to get out of here because that is so much work to talk a lot of people out of that. And the hyper vigor that the far right is facing right now is treacherous, and the regular right can't even calm them down anymore. You know what I mean? Like we're all firefighters trying to help this blaze, but the blaze is like going right towards the gas station, and it's getting worse and worse. And there was a trail of gas, and that made it bigger, but now it's getting even quicker towards the gas station. Like I feel like the sides are not playing fair anymore. The left is using people and
definitely
tokenizing everybody that they can. Every tragedy that happens to any group is tokenized and capitalized by the left. And then on the right, they're just like, if we get in there, they'll never get rid of us. And it's just like, what is happening? Like, I was born in '87. It wasn't like this, I promise.
Yeah,
it wasn't this bad.
And just to kind of compound on that, Tony, look, brother, it's like I feel like you're asking, maybe I'm wrong, but it sounds to me like you're making you're making an assumption and then you're making a suggestion. It sounds to me like you're saying you don't believe that we watch conservative media. Like I watch Victory Channel. It's about I don't know if you even know what that is. It's to the right of OAN.
I think it was the Royal Week. I don't think he was saying we don't watch it.
Well, and I didn't know if you were talking about us in general or
I didn't hear
or
that.
just liberals and the typical liberal. And you might be right. That like the typical liberal might not turn on Fox News because they're like, well, what does Tucker have to say? And there's some validity there. But like I watch conservative media. I used to listen to Ben Shapiro every single day. Mikey knows this because he was furious at me for talking about it. And then like Ben went super far right in the last 3 years. You know, like his narrative changed from being this more neutral type of guy who didn't like Trump but agreed with some of the policy.
I'm just a conservative.
To like this whole to just going off into this weird territory. So I feel like you're implying that the left doesn't know what's going on conservative media. I feel like we do, but the other piece of that is that
but we do. But who do we get that from? It's not from the right.
Well, a lot of times we'll get it from like Twitter, or we'll get it from like a Twitch streamer who like watches that. Like I'll do that. I'll literally go on stream on Friday, turn on conservative news, and then pause it and say this is where they're wrong and this is why. right? And again, it's my opinion, but the other piece is, though, that I think is important here is like, I don't feel like it's incumbent on me to go to a far right person and say, I want to debate this issue with you, even though I do it. I do in Twitter spaces all the time. And I'd love to have you join me in one. Because I do this a lot, but they don't come into ours. They want to come on our show and talk about their ideas, but they don't want us on their show because they don't want to platform our ideas because they're afraid of losing on their show and losing their audience. But also look at what they did to their own people. Liz Cheney, David Valadez got saved because he's McCarthy's best buddy. That's the only reason why Trump didn't go against him. With the exception of David Valadez, every other person who voted for Trump's impeachment is gone. And that's because there is no tolerance on the right for any deviation from dear leader.
Long live
And
the
that
empire.
and you want me to have a conversation with them? I mean, that's a super hard task to ask, right?
I'm saying, what if you could? I'm actually offering that as like, it doesn't sound like it's something you'd want, but basically the idea of having conversations with people that you disagree with it's not for everybody.
We're doing it now.
Okay, great. We're doing it now. So this is all I'm asking for, right?
Yeah.
This is the lifeblood of democracy, right? Because if we just go off into our separate camps, maybe Mikey's right. We should just have a bunch of different countries. We could just be like,
yeah.
But in order to get there, there's probably be a bunch of wars, and there's probably be a lot of people
No.
dying. Yeah, maybe not. Maybe we can just, can you just let
Illinois
Texas go and let California go and let New York? It'd be kind of a weird country, right?
And then let Illinois and Michigan and Wisconsin be absorbed by Canada.
And then you'll be a Canadian de facto.
And then I won't even have to move.